What if we've been asking the wrong question about grief? For years, I've watched people struggle with grief and loss, burnout, anxiety, broken relationships, and major life transitions. And the more I watched, the more one question began bothering me. What if we've been asking the wrong question? Now, most approaches to grief focus on emotions. How sad am I? How angry am I? How anxious am I? And how long will these feelings last? Those are important questions. But what if they aren't the deepest questions? Over time, I began noticing something. People weren't only saying, I feel sad. They were saying things like, I don't know who I am anymore. Part of me died. My life doesn't make sense. I don't know where I belong. Now, those aren't simple emotional statements. They're statements about identity. My name is Douglas Fossett. My studies in communication and mental health, grief and bereavement, theology, and years of observing human suffering led me to begin asking a different question. What if grief and many other forms of suffering disrupt more than emotions? What if they disrupt the structures through which we understand meaning and belonging, purpose, relationships, and self-understanding? That question eventually became the foundation of my work called the Fossett Framework. Now, most grief theories ask, what emotions does loss produce? The Fossett Framework asks what structures of identity were disrupted by the loss. That question changes the conversation because loss doesn't simply affect how we feel. Loss can affect our sense of meaning, of belonging, of our purpose, our relationships, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. In other words, loss can disrupt the way structures that help us make sense of ourselves and the world around us. I call this identity disruption. And the more I explored it, the more I began seeing it everywhere, not only in grief, but in retirement, burnout, divorce, career changes, faith crisis, social isolation and cultural change, and even the technological transformations happening around the world today. This channel exists because I believe many of the challenges facing individuals and families, even organizations and society, are connected by a deeper question. What happens when the structures that once gave coherence to identity begin to break down? Over the coming weeks, we'll explore grief and loss, restoration, faith and meaning, technology, and the changing world around us through the lens of identity disruption. Not merely asking what happened, but asking what it means. Because before we can rebuild our lives, we must first understand what has been disrupted. My name is Doug, and welcome to Identity Disruption.